Welcome. These will be my thoughts on Amy's Dead End Dreamhouse, Season 1, Episode 2, Ugly Panic. The episode is rated TVMA, so this video B. There will be spoilers for at least these first two episodes, possibly the first 6, since those are the ones that have aired and I've watched so far. And yeah, another episode that I absolutely loved. So I will start with the YouTube video recommendation. So, since it is Women's History Month, I am trying to focus on recommending videos by female leftist YouTubers. Now, Kat Abu-Ghazali is not technically, she's using her YouTube because she's trying to get elected, and I've looked at her platform, sounds great, and she is incredibly funny and insightful, not unlike Maggie Mae Fish. So the video Kat Legalizes Comedy, Kat Abu-Ghazali for Illinois, is the one I'm recommending today. And yeah, it's also very easy to talk about, since Amy, Maggie's the actress, since Amy is the protagonist here, it is very easy to talk about, to focus on issues faced by female characters. There we go. Yeah, I'm not getting enough sleep these days. We're gonna power through it, because I'm too stubborn not to make videos. I love doing this, even if it doesn't always show. Yeah, so this entire episode, it's such an important issue. There are a lot of people who really struggle to feel comfortable about their own appearance and presentation, and this does such a good job of looking at the reasons why and, having some dark jokes about it without getting into, like, it's one of those things where it's difficult to, have humor surrounding this without ending up accidentally reaffirming some of this, like actually saying, well, look, no, this is what's actually physically unattractive. And that's like, yeah, but you're doing it right now. Then you're accidentally doing the thing that you're criticizing. We should all be criticizing it. But yeah, this manages to do well at that. So the episode does a really solid job of, it's basically immediately established with, there's like a car crash, and then one of them calls the other ugly, and the other one points out, I mean, they say, how dare you, but they're also kind of, through the way that the line is written and delivered, it is really highlighting, why is my appearance relevant to this at all? Like, the fuck does that have to do with a fucking car crash, But, yeah. And Amy wakes up and she's like, do you hear that? And we're like, yeah, it sounds like, maybe someone needs to call the police. Sounds, I don't know. I'm a little worried about road rage because they're already shouting at each other, and there's always already been, the crash has happened. But no, she's just like, sounds like another beautiful day. And this episode also makes great use of the old gag of the oversized props for these kids shows. At the start she's using what are they called again? I don't remember what those are called in English, but to comb. It's a comb for combing your hair. Why don't more objects have the name and verb just describe the same thing? It's a good way to remember when you're not getting enough sleep. And at the end, it's the toothbrush, But this video and the rest in this that I do on the show will build on what I said in the first one. I'm going to try not to restate what I said in the first one. And let's see, I guess yeah, they talk about how, she feels ugly but isn't really, and the thing about how it's the fault of TV, which is such an accurate and important thing to note. It is. I mean, today not only TV, it's media in general, but yeah, we are constantly bombarded with all these images of perfection, and so much of the time we don't look at, well, is the person actually happy or are they still insecure about their appearance? I don't think I'm going to name the exact celebrity, but I remember some years back hearing, yeah, I was watching the show where, I guess it was one of those late night, was it Jay Leno? It might have been Jay Leno, but one of those shows, and like the guest talked about how before she got these various, procedures, she used to feel unattractive, and it seemed as though, oh, now she is more confident, which is, of course, that's one of the selling points of that sort of thing. But then the host, I don't remember all of the exact words, but he said something and followed it up. I think he was trying to be supportive, but after saying something, I think he might have been describing hatred of people who don't, adhere to, current beauty standards. But he described that, and then he said, to me, that's ugly. And the moment he said the word ugly, like you could just see she felt like she was being called ugly. Even though, like, logically, rationally, that doesn't make sense. And that did come across from her face. Like, it didn't look like she actually believed it, but she felt it nevertheless. So even after all of that, she spent all this money, and by the end of that, yeah, she did adhere to, the beauty standards of the time, but she still felt like she didn't. So did it actually help? If just the word, even not directed at her, even not describing, because he's using it, he's trying to redefine the word, which I think we should, to just mean, something that we shouldn't be doing, instead of, oh, this person isn't conventionally attractive. I appreciate, it could be a little bit of a mouthful to say not conventionally attractive instead of the other one. I'm trying not to use the other one because I do really, I hate how much power it has over us. I don't think we should be judging anyone based on their physical appearance. It is really all about inner beauty, trying to do good in this world. It doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter. I appreciate that right now, sadly, in a lot of contexts, it does, but that's something we can change. And I think the episode does a really solid job of expressing and exploring that. Now, I think yeah, also the things that she describes about herself, like TV is like nodding along, the media says, yep, these things are definitely not attractive. But, Quake and Mike are like, the fuck are you even talking about? Like, what, and they even, we get these close-ups with like goofy sound effects and everything, and it's still like, I don't even know what, just, yeah, really nicely done. And the thing about, doing your own research, you find out that you were completely right. That's, oh my God, that really, that struck a nerve. That is such a crucial thing to understand about today, the way we relate to the idea of truth. Like, there are a lot of things where there is such a thing as objective truth, and then there are a lot of things where it's just feelings and perspective and such. But even objective truth is being denied by people who are made uncomfortable by it, and we need to get to a place where we're okay that something makes us uncomfortable. Like, that's just part of life, you know? And we aren't trying to redefine things to the point where we're like, no, that's, this must be how it is because it feels right to me. And yeah, I like when TV is trying to hide from view by like turning to static. Okay. Right. And the fact that it's, yeah, I really appreciated the way they exaggerated the fuck out of these, you know, beauty products, processes, concrete injections, 100% real concrete, and new head. No one can tell who she is anymore. I'm so happy for her. And how dehumanizing they are, like getting a new head to the point where no one knows who they are. It strips you of your individuality, of your humanity. And which is also, that's also what they point to when, let's see, I think it's Mike who says, no, you don't look like Quimp, but Quimp already looks like Quimp. And the let's see, what's the other thing that they're right? I mean, the concrete, like, that's extremely dangerous, and I'm not saying that that exact thing is being done, but there are people who have suffered intensely because of some of these procedures. Yeah, it's really crucial to criticize, and it is one of those things that is not like exclusively millennial, but it is a big thing for millennials. Certainly, it's a bigger thing for millennials than, is it maybe boomers who are, or wait, or do we have to go further back? There's at least one generation that is relatively recent that don't really care about this sort of thing, or at least don't go as deep as, like, they might just like buy specific clothes or something, but not, get actual plastic surgery and such. I really love the ad break where, the thing, we'll be right back. Yeah, but they know that. Well, okay, so here's the history lesson, and then it cuts to an ad, and when it cuts back, Mike is like, I don't know, just, yeah, we get another, you know, suicidal ideation joke. But yeah, it really is like genuinely sad, like with honestly a pretty substantial percentage of the things that Reagan did, especially the ones that haven't been reversed, which in a number of cases is them, just in general. Let's see. I think that does. Right, and the ad is also just pitch perfect. I think it's some of Maggie's best work as far as sounding and looking like very specific. Like, I have watched, these, like, I would say it's like 70s, 80s kinds of infomercial, trying to sell you something that you clearly don't actually need kind of things. The way she uses her voice, her diction, everything, it's just pitch perfect. And yeah, you know, glad to see MLM getting this, you know, I mean, they don't spend an awful lot of time on it in this episode, but it really is something we should be very wary of. It is, yeah. I guess that does pretty much bring us to the, so yeah, there's the MHC, and it really works the way that these are just such exaggerated, like, it doesn't make any sense. Why would anyone want to look like this? And that is what a lot of these things do look like. And to be clear, it's important to underline, I'm not saying that anyone should feel bad about the way they look unless it's something like, swastika tattoo or doing blackface, that sort of thing, things that you chose. Unless you have really shitty friends, that could also explain the tattoo. But the, yeah, I do think those who have already gone through plastic surgery, I try to empathize with them because many of them do regret it. And, there's some of them where you can't really undo it. You can't go back to the way you used to look necessarily from some of them. I mean, and I guess the but yeah, so the drawings here, yeah, the artwork here does not resemble anyone who exists in the real world, and they're not things that are ever going to actually be the beauty standard. So they are being careful to, it's not like, it's one of those cases where if you look at this and you feel like this is, that, but that's what I look like, that sounds very unlikely. They are so exaggerated, which is again one of those things, because you really want to be careful. Like, it's kind of a minefield, because like hypothetically, let's say that you say, oh, look at women getting, various stuff to look, what's that thing called, slim thick or something. Like, well, what about, like, there are some people who, well, let's see, I think it's one of those things where it's extremely rare for it to occur completely naturally, but there are some people who naturally do resemble that, like, that's also one of those things we really gotta learn. Like, not everybody chooses to have curves. Like, obviously, if you are getting like some kind of elective surgery to have curves, then it's a choice. But some people do just naturally look like that, and it's ridiculous to, like, think about how absurd it is that we have sexualized parts of the body that sometimes just do or don't grow like that. It's, yeah. And yeah, so that's one option. Another is, what if they said, oh, these people who are entirely too skinny, which, like, that is something we have to be wary of. Like, it's a lot of people find it very alluring. There's a lot of media that tries to convince us that it is, but for some people it is very difficult to gain weight, so they look similar to that, and we shouldn't be judging them for that. It's just the same as we shouldn't be judging anyone who is not skinny, who has more, I'm a big believer in, basically, when it comes to body weight, if someone is actually unhealthy, then it makes sense for people close to them to have a conversation with that person. And that goes for whether they're overweight to the degree that it becomes unhealthy, or underweight to that degree. And underweightness, let's see if I recall correctly, because I'm afraid my wrist is too fucking sore to look it up right now, but I believe it is, please double check this, but it's something along the lines of being underweight to too hard of a degree is more likely to kill you, and kills you faster than being overweight. And yet we've been fed I remember, let's see, was it the 90s or early 2000s? I forget the exact time, but there was a time where, like, yeah, if you saw like a supermodel, she looked like that. And of course, ridiculously back then, I wish that I could exclude myself from the following, but some of us did indeed, like, judge the model and say, oh, look like this, look at, this stick figure. And it's like, no, but that's what they're being, like, we gotta really work on making sure our media is not so shallow. But let's see, yeah. So they also clearly had fun designing these horrific, entries in the MHC, and I love that each time she says, "Oh, look at this. This is not hot." It's just like a normal looking person. Like there's nothing wrong about the ones that she points to as not being hot. They just, I mean, maybe they don't look like a superstar. They're perfectly average. And that's something that we're encouraged to feel is wrong. And I also really appreciated how many of the MHC entries we see in motion, and we hear the noises they make, the gurgling, for example, and just, yeah, fucking horrifying. I mean, there is an actual Frankenstein's monster reference with Igor in the episode, and yeah, it feels like something out of, and that's also something, there is perhaps an element of like Frankenstein 2, this idea of just constantly changing the, so not exactly like Frankenstein, obviously, but yeah, doing something to human bodies that should not be, where it is really just about like we gotta accept, part of the what's going on in the story of Frankenstein is this acceptance of, death. It sucks, it really does, but it's not healthy to try to fight against it. And that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you if you're not immediately ready to accept it, but it becomes so much easier and better once you work on accepting, yeah, we're all gonna die one day, so we try to make the most of it. We try to love the people that we love while they're around and not forget them when they're gone. Now, I think that does pretty much get us to, right, I love the meta-ness of, midway through the episode, they're like, wait, there's too much running time left of this episode. The character arc can't be complete yet. And the, yeah, the point made about like, well, there aren't any more tonsils to remove, so what are you going to do now? Just, yeah. So I, once again, I'm not familiar with, really the only person who pops up as a guest in one of these that well, let's see, there's that guy who plays the doctor in one of the upcoming episodes. Other than that, it really is just Tessa Violet that I know, and some of the main cast, Maggie Mae Fish, and I can't believe I'm blanking on his name, Bill Corbett. But yeah, I do not know Percy, but genuinely inspirational. Just yeah, I really appreciate this willingness to be open about painful moments and sharing what you learn from them. That's something that a lot of media really discouraged back when I was a child and teenager, 90s and such. So yeah, it's really great to see, because like, listen, everybody goes through something that we wish we didn't, and we can try to learn from it and maybe help make sure, certain things are genuine, like what Percy went through, no one should have to go through. And that's something we can work on, once we know that it is happening, and that happens by being honest about it, as much as that can be painful to do, Yeah, very, very brave, and love to see their confidence now. Dancing twice in mere minutes. I think that does pretty much cover. I thought that despite the fairly limited, you know, level of expression on Quake's face, they still managed a pretty perfect, like, what face? Right now I actually forget what it was that had been said right before, but there's just like second or two of Quake just being completely silent and kind of just staring. And I think right, the couple of different points made about that MLM ad was also just were just pitch perfect. The thing about, like, so you maybe think that you know what's in the DVDs, so you don't need to buy them, but I'm gonna keep it vague, and yeah. Let's see. I think that does pretty much get us to the right. Also the ad for and also that they call it Pretty Prison. Because, like, yeah, if you obsess over your physical appearance, it's going to be a prison for you. It is not liberating. It is the opposite. It is illiberal. And I guess that does pretty much cover the. But yeah. The thing about the in order to advertise the concrete, like, they ridiculously exaggerate the like, again, obviously nobody actually has, like, the yeah, the what's it called? I forget what part of the face, but they're describing part of the face as hanging so low that it touches the ground, and that's not a thing, though. So yeah, I think that does pretty much. Yeah, at one point she even tries black magic in order to achieve her appearance, and then she almost burns the place down. I think that does pretty much. I really appreciated that they also had the detail about, so one of the things is, for most of the episode, Amy is thinking about, like, her appearance as just, yeah, well, I mean, the yeah, as a young white woman. And Percy talks about, presenting. So I'm trying not to. I've understood that some um, members of the community do not like when people who are not members, even. I try to be an ally when we use the Q word. So what I will say instead is LGBTQ plus. Percy presented as that and was visibly Indian, and you know, yeah, their body weight. I'm using they them pronouns because, again, I'm afraid I simply am not 100% sure what pronouns they use, and again, my wrists are too sort of look right now, but yeah, presenting like that made them even more hated, and that's also one of those things, like, because at the end of the day, Maggie Mae Fish is, a white woman, and I'm afraid I forget if she is a member, but she does not necessarily present as a member of the LGBTQ plus community. And sometimes that's the thing. It really sucks because just because you are a white woman who passes for cishet doesn't mean that you don't also have problems. But of course, there is some history, white feminism, white women, saying that they are better than non-white women. And let's see, I believe, in fact, non-whites in general, which, it starts to become really silly the moment that you even start to say, oh, certain people are just inherently born better. Like, no, we should be judged on what we do to do good. That's the, it's these other things are so arbitrary. Like, there are parts of the world where they don't even think about, and certainly they didn't before, like, someone came from a country where they had or invented or come to believe in the idea of, for example, race. Like, yeah, you could talk about different people, you might have different skin color or something, but like, there are white people who have darker skin than some white passing people who have, at least one parent who is, for example, African American. It's, yeah, someone decided a while back that these should have different value assigned to them. And like, if you actually look at the history, it was kind of just to justify not racism, slavery. It was just because, well, I don't know, we're not supposed to enslave other human beings, but these people who are clearly human beings look different, maybe speak a different language than us, so we can just pretend that they're not really human. And that's why, like, just in general, we should not be enslaving any living thing that, like, if it is not literally like life or death, like, just find another solution. But anyway, yeah, so it's really great to have Percy's perspective in there as well. And yeah, showing, that they're both members of at least one minority group each, and there is community, empathy, and solidarity instead of, struggle between them. Because, like, if you're not rich, you have more in common with the rest of us who are also not rich than you do with the rich. Like, this whole thing of, like, oh, cishet white men are inherently better than others, that's propaganda that is meant to uphold the systems of patriarchy and capitalism. And part of that is to say, well, if you're a cishet white man, you could be rich one day as long as you don't have too much empathy for those who don't fit into all those groups, or just don't perform it in the traditional way. And so, you might end up spending a lot of time just hating people who are potential allies who could help you get to a better place instead of working to make things better. And, like, to be clear, I'm not saying that you can't have problems for being a cishet white man, but those problems are more likely to be based on class and financial status than, like, to be clear, if you live in a white majority country, can individuals be racist against white people? Sure, but they don't have the kind of institutional power that white supremacists have in these countries. Like, right now, there are people who are able to get away with brutalizing, even killing non-whites, and sometimes also whites, as long as it's done in the name of white supremacy. And I'm not saying that we should be doing anything violent against the people who are getting away with it. I'm saying we have to get to a place where there's accountability, where no one can hurt anyone else without there being some, and to be clear, I'm talking about restorative justice. I'm not talking about retributive justice. I do appreciate some people, it might be necessary to at least temporarily restrain them, but we should use that as little as possible, like, only to the extent that it seems like, okay, we need at least this degree of it. There is an over-incarceration problem in countries like America. And I think that might just about cover, but yeah, it's not, if you, like me, are a cishet white man, your problems are not because of feminism. It's not because of people who aren't white. It's not because of LGBT plus people. It's not immigrants. It's not any minority, unless you count the, technically, if we are going by numbers, then rich people are a minority, but they are not a minority in how the power is distributed. They have a ridiculous amount of power. I also really appreciate it, once again, a little bit of comrade, let's see, was it Quake who said it? I forget, but one of the characters in this episode pointed out, people who get all these plastic surgeries are, frequently unethically loaded. And that's another one of the things, like, yeah, so many of these images, like, they're impossible to achieve for the majority of people. The money for it just isn't there, so you end up just hating yourself without, for something that you shouldn't feel bad about. And I'm not saying it's your fault. It's, media, it's culture. Those are things we can change, thankfully. But not only do you, not only that, but you also have something, it's also something where you can't actually, engage in the solution. And we gotta be careful. That's a general thing. That's not just for, the idea of conventionally attractive good looks. If you are dealing with something where you can't really solve it, then you should be careful not to let yourself hate that about yourself. Like, obviously the in many situations you can solve it. It might just require outside of the box thinking. And I'm not advocating something illegal or unethical, but sometimes, like, yeah, for example, we have all these, there are a bunch of people who are blaming minorities for the problems caused by the rich right now. And it would be much better if, we progressives are trying to convince them that's not the source of the problem. But the especially good news is there, for many of these things, there are solutions, and progressive politicians are working towards them. But we need to all do what we can. And I'm not asking anyone to, do something that they feel is simply unsustainable. Like, for example, it's important to note that while it is important to donate, if you can, to these good causes, if you simply can't spare the money, and right now, part because of Trump's many fuck-ups, right now a lot of people just do not have money to donate. And it's obviously also a problem every so often. Turns out, oh, this, good cause that, a bunch of people have donated to, turns out there was some embezzlement or something, but anything that you can do, is wonderful. And it helps the cause. It also makes you feel better about yourself. You don't have to take my word for it. You can look it up. Studies have shown one of the ways that people become happier is if they do something constructive. They try to work towards making the world a better place. Yeah, I think that does pretty much, in addition to having community, feeling and receiving expressing and receiving love, and trying to do things that help sustain yourself in a healthy way. I feel like that does just about cover it. Let's see. So yeah, I like the part where they're talking about, like, the lesson of the episode, and one of them is like, was that the lesson? Did somebody learn that? Okay. Yeah, I think that might just about right. And the point, I love that they made the point about how much, beauty trends have changed, and I love the way that they just jump. It was like 1250 to 1920, and it's like, yeah, obviously in between. Well, let's see. I guess in between was it maybe more clothes, but certainly, the supposed ideal way to look has changed tremendously, which is also something, you know, if you're just trying to argue with like a transphobe or something, and or some, yeah, and that's something as in situation. I'm not saying transphobes are, I'm not trying to dehumanize transphobes. I'm not fond of using their own weapons in not when the weapon is that horrible. Dehumanization, it leads to really horrible things. But the if you are trying to argue with a transphobe, they might say that it is simply not natural for a man to wear a dress, which obviously we know, you know, we who are trans supportive already know a trans woman is not, you know, yeah, trans women are women. But there are, I guess they're paintings. They can't really have been pictures, right? Like photographs. But yeah, there are paintings clearly depicting, you know, some of the people, you know, from, I forget exactly when, but you know, if you go into the past, and you don't even have to go ridiculously far, you'll see men wearing wigs, makeup, and dresses. And men used to wear, I forget if it was red or pink, and women used to wear blue. And now it's the other way around. It is arbitrary. These are just things we decide, you know? If you time traveled back to, you know, yeah, you wouldn't have to go that far in order to, for someone to be horrified by the way you look today, even if what you look like today completely adheres to the current beauty standards. And yeah, especially appreciated that they pointed out, hey, it used to actually be seen as positive to have a lot of body fat. And obviously part of that was simply that, you know, back when there was less that could be done in order to, you know, protect a woman during pregnancy and childbirth, and, you know, afterwards as well, protecting both her and once the baby is viable outside the fetus, also the baby. Yeah, like, it was really important for the woman to have some weight on her, because that made it more likely that the birth would go well and the baby would survive. And then today, the ideal is, you know, to be really skinny. And you actually have people judging women for not immediately looking like they did before becoming pregnant. You know, it's completely ridiculous. It's yeah. I think that does pretty much cover this had some of my favorite Cindy stuff, because at one point, you know, the camera just is on Cindy for like a few seconds, and like clearly Cindy said something. You know, the characters on the show all perceived it. That was also, it was pretty funny in the opening with Percy like accidentally dropping Cindy, and it's like, oh, that's a trip to the hospital or ER, I guess, but whatever. And right, also, and Amy taking a banana out of the refrigerator and then being like, oh, hi, and then she answers the banana like it's a phone. Like, wow. And yeah, I think, let's see, there's at least one more thing I wanted to say about that. Yeah. So the, you know, the response makes it clear. Yeah, something was said that I cannot for the life of me quite determine. And later in the episode, we get another mention. So apparently, Quake has decided never again to break into a zoo for profit. From now on, only for pleasure. And apparently, a microwave fire was part of the visit to the zoo. So I have no earthly or multiversal idea what the actual fuck happened at the zoo with Quake and Amy, but it led to vowing never to do it again, except for pleasure, but certainly not for profit again. So somehow there was money to be made by breaking into a zoo, and there was a microwave fire, and it's genuinely like a disturbing memory that they have. And while on some level I kind of wish, like, I mean, they might make more episodes. I'm not 100% sure right now if they are or not, but it's not impossible that at some point we will get like a detailed explanation of what the fuck happened there. But I kind of love how incredibly vague yet ominous the details that we do learn in this episode about that thing that apparently happened are.